Players to add to get you to the fantasy championship right now on FFT Express. It's Adam and Jamie here on Tuesday morning. All right, we are looking ahead to this weekend and Thursday as well and talking about the players you can add. And you know what? We've had a really good year at running back, pretty healthy year, but not week 15. A lot of injuries there. Then this running back situation is rough. So we've got Jerome Ford with his cape on, flying in to be a superhero for your team, Jamie. How much do you like Jerome Ford right now?
I think he's actually worth using as a low-end number 2 running back, so I may have him ranked a little bit too high. He's around 20 in my rankings this week, but there's such a good opportunity here, and it's been such an up and down season for almost everything related to Cleveland. We don't know who the quarterback's going to be, but the matchup has been fantastic against the Bengals lately. You said it on the show, which I didn't realize, that a running back's got either 90 yards or a touchdown against the Bengals in every game this season. When these two teams met in week 7, Nick Chubb scored a touchdown. That was actually his first game back from his injury. And Ford in 2 of his first 5 games was over 15 PPR points. So not a bad situation here. Plus the game that he's coming off of, one of the better games against the Chiefs. I know it was one big run, but still, who's the quarterback? That's the biggest question. Is it going to be Jameis or is it going to be Dorian Thompson-Robinson? I think he could be at least a flex. He definitely somebody that should be added because you don't want to give your opponent the chance to use Jerome Ford against you if in fact lost David Montgomery or don't have Alvin Kamara or chasing just that position in general.
Yeah, so we got a question here in the chat. Should I pick up Strange to block an opponent or go get Ford? My other running backs are Kamara, Jacobs, and Breece Hall in full PPR, and he has Hawkinson, Jonnu Smith, Lapointe. He doesn't need Strange, but what would you do? Like, do you block your opponent or do you go get Jerome Ford?
I think you need Jerome Ford. I currently have Ford ranked ahead of Breece Hall. I mean, I'm nervous about Hall, taking on a good Rams defense that he may not be 100%. If Hall practices in full, then I'll make that switch and put Hall ahead of him. But not practicing last week, getting lucky with the touchdown against the Jaguars team, which we know is bad against running backs. Like, I think you need Jerome Ford. I don't think you're, playing defense. You're playing offense there.
If I can't get Jerome Ford and I need a running back, who am I looking at?
Kendre Miller makes the most sense just because he'll get a lot of opportunities, most likely, if Kamara can't play. The Raiders situation is a little bit messy, unless we get word that, Antonio Pierce, who's been relatively honest about his backs, says it's Alexander Madison because McCormick's out. We're going to let Madison get all the work. But I wouldn't be surprised if Amir Abdullah is better just because of his role in the passing game. If we find out that Tony Pollard's not practicing again, maybe Tajay Spears gets the chance to start. And that would be pretty fantastic, just getting all the work against the Colts. So there's different ways you can go. For right now, I have Kendre Miller, the second running back, to go get.
Okay. Yeah. And right. It's tough. You prefer Abdullah, right, with the Raiders?
Slightly. Non-PPR, I'd go Madison. But full PPR, I think Abdullah's shown you enough. In the last 5 games, with either Madison out or now McCormick getting banged up, he's got 3 catches in 3 of them. He scored 10 PPR points in 3 of them. So it's been 3 touchdowns. So it's a little fluky, but did have a 5-catch game. Did have 2 5-catch games. So there's a chance for him to be, I think, heavily involved, especially if it's Ritter, because he just wasn't throwing the ball down the field.
It's unfortunate that so many of our decisions really have to come down to who's playing quarterback for this team, because we would like a guy, maybe Cedric Tillman, if you need a wide receiver, if we thought Jameis Winston was going to start, but we don't know. Also, if Jameis Winston does start, we don't know if he's going to finish. So, there's just a lot of moving parts. But let's talk about quarterback here. Are there any good quarterbacks to get on the waiver wire?
Aaron Rodgers is probably the best of the guys who are available. You can make arguments for Cooper Rush in his matchup against Tampa Bay. You can make arguments for Mason Rudolph with how he's performing. 19 plus fantasy points in the 3 games where he's played at least a half. 2 starts, over 21 fantasy points. So he's looked decent, but it's Cooper Rush. Carson Wentz stepping into the Chiefs offense. Last time we saw him in a Sean McVay offense, he had 30 fantasy points in week 18 of last season. So, there are some options there, but I think those are better suited for 2 QB in super flex leagues. I think in 1 QB leagues, Rodgers is a top 15 quarterback for me this week. So I would start him over Tua, for example, if the tackles are still out for the Dolphins. You can make a case that he's better than Brock Purdy if you want to. He's giving you 18 plus points for the most part for the last 2 months, and coming off a 36-point game against the Jaguars.
And I know you like Caleb Williams if he were available to bounce back this week, right?
I do. I think the Detroit defense is showing you enough right now that they're so beat up that he's coming back home after a 3-game road trip. He had 30 fantasy points against them just 3 weeks ago. So it's not a horrible situation. Like, I was nervous about Caleb taking on the Vikings because they're healthy. It was in their building. It was the third straight road game for them. And Brian Flores seeing him for a second time, they're healthy. If the Lions were healthy, I'd feel the same way. Lions are just not healthy right now.
All right, let's take a break. Talk about wide receiver and tight end when we come back on Fantasy Football Today Express. Wide receiver, it's not the best week for wide receiver. Should you hang on to Adam Thielen, though, or look to maybe Jalen McMillan, who's your favorite wide receiver on the waiver wire?
I would hang on to Adam Thielen. I just think, again, you're looking at a disappointing game for a receiver who was so hot the previous 2 weeks and still has the chance to play at the same level of Jalen McMillan, if not a little bit better, So I like his setup a little bit more. I like his situation right now just a little bit more, but they're close. They're both number 3 receivers, and I think he said it best on Sunday. Sometimes number 3 fantasy receivers let you down.
Yeah.
So we got a little overexcited maybe about Adam Thielen after 21 targets and 17 catches in back-to-back games with Bryce Young playing better. They played a Dallas defense that was, inspired and did a good job. So can he bounce back this week against the Cardinals? Not an easy matchup, but I still think he's a number 3 receiver.
I actually thought that Adam Thielen, that the confidence fantasy managers are going to have in Adam Thielen could be influenced by what Keenan Allen was going to do on Monday night in week 15, because he followed the same path. He had 2 big games in a row, and then he had a clunker when his quarterback struggled, didn't throw that much. And then he bounced back with a really good game, 20 fantasy points. And maybe then Thielen is just like a week behind Keenan Allen, and they're basically the same guy. They're like a old, slow, but crafty slot tight end that's a reliable target for a young quarterback.
That sideline catch was ridiculous.
By Keenan Allen?
Yeah.
I am not recalling it.
Oh, you should take a look. He was all by himself. Caleb Williams was under pressure.
Yeah, that was a great catch. Yeah.
He threw it down the sideline. It was 2 yards out of bounds. And he just hung on in the sideline with his feet and just fell down and caught it.
All right, how do you feel about Jalen McMillan versus Darnell Mooney versus Jawan Jennings coming off a bad game? What do you think?
I'm going right back to Jennings. Not to the same extent. I had Jennings as a number 1 receiver last week, so you got to build in a little bit of concern. But the target share was still there for Jennings, so I'm not panicked about him. Mooney, I'm a little bit concerned about. I still have Mooney ranked ahead of McMillan, but the game last night was pretty telling that you may not get the pass attempts because of how the game flow will go for the Falcons. And so in the case of McMillan, you got to assume that we're going to see Baker be Baker. So that might be something I have to reevaluate.
Okay, so at other wide receivers, the Packers guys, Jamie likes Dobbs a little bit more than Christian Watson, but it's just not a good week for wide receivers. Rashad Bateman is on his list, and we know how unreliable that could be. And if you want deeper league help, there's a segment on it on our show, like guys like Jalen Coker and Tim Patrick and things like that on our longer show. So let's finish off with the tight ends. And just how much do you like Brenton Strange this week?
I like him as a low end number 1 option, coming off the targets that he had, no Evan Ingram. So there's a chance, and we like those situations, so Mac Jones, I think, will continue to lean on him, hopefully enough. But he's not a slam dunk, number 1 guy. I mean, we're running out of slam dunk number 1 guys with, certainly what's happened to Brock Bowers the last couple of weeks with the quarterback situation there for the Raiders. But in the same range of Tucker Kraft and Pat Freiermuth and better than Kate Otten, better than Kyle Pitts, some of these guys that have been disappointing us, so there's a chance here for Strange and Smart, to be low end number 1 options. Smart just missed a couple of catches that would have had a pretty spectacular day, and the Broncos have, middle of the road against tight ends. So there's a chance for him to have an opportunity this week.
How you feel about the DSTs? Who are the DSTs to pick up?
There's some good ones. I'd look at the Packers. That's a great matchup against a really beat up Saints team, especially if Kamara doesn't play. You got the Texans against Carson Wentz with, the offensive line struggling and letting down Patrick Mahomes. So now it's clear difference there for what we're looking at. And then we've said this for the last couple of weeks, like target the Falcons, back-to-back games with the Raiders and the Giants. There's a chance for the Falcons to be league winner. Nobody ever thought that when the season started, but here we are with the Falcons. I have one league where I went in as the 1 seed, and it's 8 teams make the playoffs. So I had to play, and this was the last seed is the highest scoring team. And I'm like, I'm screwed because that team was loaded. and I somehow got by because of Josh Allen, because he's awesome, and had the Falcons defense. Like this, it's 24 teams. You know, whatever defense you draft, you're basically stuck with unless you make trades. And I've had the Falcons all season long. Not with the. I went in thinking that Raheem Morris would make that team better because I did like some of the talent there, especially in the back end with the safeties. They've been awful. And then you said it on the show. Coming off the bye week, the pass rush has been great. Ellis has just been a huge find. What they've been doing with him in terms of rushing the passer, and now here we go. These two matchups could be difference makers for fantasy managers.
More sacks for the Falcons in their last 3 games than they had in their first 11 games combined.
It started with that Chargers game. They got to Justin Herbert 5 times.
Unbelievable. Okay, we're done here with FFT Express. Thanks so much. Good luck. Go get those waiver claims in, and we'll talk to you tomorrow on Fantasy Football Today Express.